Brian is a CTO, Chief Technology Officer at KeyData Associates. And Brian has extensive experience in the Canadian IT industry, which led to develop a broad skill set. With over 15 years experience focused on managing and growing cybersecurity consulting practice, Brian has led large Canadian InfoSec projects in the federal public sector, energy industry, and financial services. And his speech topic, as you can see, is ransomware protection, preventative identity controls.
Okay, so as Brian said, today I'm going to be talking to you about the use of identity controls in the prevention of ransomware. Before we get into my goals for today, I just want to tell you a little bit about KeyData. As Brian said, we're an organization that's solely focused on identity, providing services throughout North America. We're a Canadian-based company with large projects on the go throughout North America. We're growing like crazy, and we have some fantastic clients and some fantastic projects on the go. Our area of focus is in the three areas that we'll be talking about a little bit today with respect to ransomware. That is identity and access management, privileged access management, and customer identity and access management. And with each of those different practices, cloud is playing an increasingly large part with all of our customers as time goes by. And for each of these different practices, we have cloud as an embedded skill set within each of those. So it tells you a little bit about something, how we're approaching, these types of problems as an organization. My goals for today are to talk to you a little bit about the basics of ransomware, introduce three ways in which identity controls very specifically can help you prevent ransomware, and then give you a couple of tips at the end to re-energize your IAM program and help you prepare in the unfortunate event that ransomware comes to your company. So just to introduce the topic a little bit and define ransomware, I mean, you can loosely define ransomware as a type of threat where the attacker attempts to extort some sort of ransom from the victim. And there's a lot of scary statistics about ransomware. I'm sure you can find some of these on your own as well. Suffice it to say, this is a threat that's happening very frequently and more increasingly frequent as time goes on. Very costly in terms of monetary damage to organizations and in terms of downtime to the sheer number of incidents and the scope of each of those incidents. But I'm kind of assuming that a lot of you already know that, because for most of us that work in the industry, it's touched either our own company or it's touched companies that we work with. Now, why is this threat sort of bubbling to the surface, even more so as time goes on? Essentially, we're heading into the perfect storm of risk with respect to ransomware. The threat actors themselves are evolving. There's money to be made here, and organizations know that. So we're seeing a lot of well-funded criminal organizations entering in. These are not simply people out to just smash and grab. These are well-organized criminal entities. And even to the extent that we're seeing ransomware as a service organizations pop up, and it's reducing the barrier of entry for criminals to get involved in this industry, unfortunately, if they can just use this as a type of service offering or leverage it as ransomware as a service. In terms of the threat environment, the risk of ransomware has never been greater. Ransomware relies a lot on social engineering, and social engineering attacks, increase when society tends to be in some form of upheaval. Studies have shown, for example, that social engineering attacks are more effective during periods for the last year when there were large COVID announcements. People are anxious, people are interested in information, and they might suspend common sense and fall victim to this type of attack. So the climate is definitely susceptible to social engineering attacks, and The environment too, we've all been pushed to work from home, some organizations faster than they would have liked, and there might be some gaps they've opened up by doing that. The attack methods of ransomware have also been evolving. We're seeing more, what we would say, human-operated ransomware, and previously ransomware was strictly an automated malware type threat. But now it's become even more dangerous, where at some point a human being becomes involved in the attack cycle, and now you've got some more intelligence. It's not simply encrypting your files and trying to extort a ransom right away now. You've got attackers that are dwelling in your infrastructure for longer periods of time, getting at more important crown jewels and providing some human intelligence there. So the threat in terms of the attack methods is greater, and the ransomware scenarios have changed as well. So criminal organizations are now trying to go more along the lines of blackmailing organizations by threatening to release information. So it's not only about encrypting and then asking a ransom for the keys, which is sort of the classic definition of ransomware. So all that is to say, the threat's evolving into a greater and greater threat, literally every month at this point. So why is identity a fundamental control in preventing ransomware? Well, I guess I would back up a step and say, in my humble opinion, identity is one of the most foundational identity controls within your organization. So having good identity controls is important in a lot of different areas. So, just to summarize, identity manages a diverse group of threats. Everything from accidental data modification, like really low-tech threats, right up to advanced persistent threats. Identity controls have been around, forever. They were just as relevant, in the 70s mainframe environment as they are in, highly automated cloud workload environments. So, identity is really a foundational control in the past and in the future for your organization. And that's why a diverse group of stakeholders, I'm guessing, at your organization are probably quite interested in improving identity, because everybody has a stake in better identity controls. With respect to ransomware specifically, I identified 3 different areas right away where we can apply good identity controls to help prevent ransomware. I'll talk about each of those in turn. First, multi-factor authentication. I think most of you should be familiar with that. It's a really hot topic over the last few years. It's driven a lot by the advent of cloud and the realization that passwords are not doing the trick for authentication. So the trick of a MFA initiative, though, is figuring out where to apply MFA, when to apply MFA, and using it to control your crown jewels without inconveniencing users by constantly challenging them with MFA prompts. Increasing the security without decreasing the user experience. And companies like Microsoft, we have Dana on the panel, they've done a really good job with introducing sort of frictionless MFA, like, Windows Hello, things like that. And in the context of ransomware, the more better authentication you have over your users and the better challenges you can provide to them, typically thwarts automated ransomware and even advanced persistent threats to a certain extent, human guided ransomware. So this is your first chance to contain ransomware if you have MFA deployed throughout the organization. Second concept within identity that's critical to our discussion is enforcing least privilege. So least privilege is the concept of only granting users the minimal rights that they need to do their job. Easy to say, challenging to do sometimes. You need to know exactly what your users need to access to do their job, and then you need to enforce it with the controls you have available. So, that's sort of a challenge that has to keep evolving. And for your organization to get, it's more of an aspirational goal than it is an end goal. So you're always aspiring to do better least privilege, in my opinion. For example, most organizations struggle with crossboarding, which is when people change teams. You could have the greatest restrictions over your users, from today. However, as soon as they change teams, you need to morph with them and continue to evolve your least privilege around that. So that's one area where organizations fall down. And legacy technologies too don't always do the best job of implementing least privilege, so there's challenges there as well. But in the context of ransomware, ransomware needs to find all the data that it can in order to have the most leverage over your organization. And if you can restrict people to only need-to-know basis, you're also going to restrict that ransomware, make it more challenging for that ransomware to spread. Third concept is securing privileged accounts. So again, this is a whole discipline in and of itself. The most dangerous people to your organization in terms of accounts are probably your administrators. And not only your human administrators, but the accounts that are responsible for managing automated processes, accounts that don't belong to people, administrator accounts. Securing those is a real challenge. And there's tools that have come up over the years that help you with that. But nevertheless, you really need to control those types of accounts within your organization. And again, in doing that, you have a chance at preventing ransomware from escalating and elevating beyond that initial attack and really spreading throughout the organization. So for any attack, it's critical that you have good control over your privileged access so that you can contain the attack once it's in progress. Things like just-in-time access, that's common in most cloud environments now. Behavioral analytics, monitoring what your users are doing. These are advanced techniques that you might not be doing today, but you may want to consider in the future for not just ransomware. Again, it's just a best practice for a wide range of threats. So at this point in the presentation, you might be asking, okay, well, what's my checklist? What can I do to try and, improve my identity controls? Unfortunately, I don't have a checklist. Every organization in terms of evolving your identity program is going to be fairly unique. So I think in terms of strategic preparation, the question you need to ask yourself is what process am I taking to continuously mature my identity program? Do you have an idea today what you're going to be doing this year, in 3 years, and in 5 years to mature your identity program? And if you can do that, you'll prevent not only ransomware, but a whole series of other threats, large and small. Really what we're talking about is either internally or externally conducting an IAM and privileged access gap assessment. So trying to figure out where you are today, trying to figure out where you need to be in the future, and then developing a roadmap to get there. So in the last 3 years, I think KeyData has probably done more of these in Canada than any other organization. We have a lot of templates, and we're very efficient at getting this type of an engagement done. You can also do this with internal resources or another third party by all means, but the important takeaway is you need a plan for your identity program because, as I mentioned earlier, you can make an argument that that's the most important security program within your organization, and maturing it, should be top of mind for everyone from the CISO on down. Something a little bit more tactical that you can take away, something that you can touch, is making an initiative to start cleaning up your excessive privileges. I mentioned that a few times in the body of this presentation, that's a critical control as part of your identity program, both through least privilege and through controlling privileged access. Really what we're talking about is assessing the risk of privilege within your organization. And, just to put in more tangible terms, scanning your network for excessive privileges, so excessive accounts, excessive use of accounts, developing an action plan to clean up excessive privilege. Those could be created by operators, or they could be created by malicious entities that have created, malicious admin accounts within your organization. Coming up with an action plan of cleaning those up and putting some metrics in place so that you don't slip back into that state again. Again, KeyData has a service for this. We offer it in conjunction with an organization called CyberArk, a vendor of ours. They're sort of a leader in this area, and love to talk to you about a scoping session. But again, it's something you can do if you have scanning tools within your organization. In my opinion, it's an important thing for you to highlight for two reasons with respect to ransomware. Well, number one, it's just good hygiene. It's something that you should do on a regular basis, regardless. But number two, if you do find yourself in an attack situation and you're trying to remediate, I'll leave it up to you to decide where you pick up and who you pick up and call first. But certainly your first call would be potentially legal or law enforcement. We'll be talking about that a little bit in the panel. Potentially your second call would be to an incident response organization that can help you start to recover, like Mandiant, who's also on the panel today. Potentially your third call could be to an organization that can help you assess the risk of privilege that's gone haywire since you've been compromised. And, to do that, it's a specialized skill set and part of a longer term recovery, in my opinion. So hopefully that gives you a better understanding of how identity fits into this whole puzzle. But as I said, it takes a broad range of controls to prevent, detect, and remediate against ransomware.